So validating our emotions is probably the absolute most important thing that we can do for ourselves and for the people around us. This has been driving home for me the past couple weeks, because I've realized how I talk about validating emotions. I tell other people they should validate their emotions, but I have a very hard time validating how I feel, and therefore actually have a hard time validating how other people feel. Not all the time, but in regards, I've noticed that when how I feel conflicts with how somebody else feels, I have a difficult time validating either perspective. I feel like in order for me to validate the other person, I have to invalidate myself, or in order for me to validate myself, I have to invalidate the other person. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, because it puts me in a position to where I feel helpless and I feel extremely guilty. And really, I feel guilty for the things that I feel. And I know, of course, cognitively, that it's okay. Whatever we feel is okay. It's not right or wrong. And I also know that we're never overreacting to when we feel something, we are never overreacting. Because usually, if we're triggered, even by something that seems like it's quote-unquote not a big deal, it's usually because it's related to something that a trauma or original trauma or wound from our childhood, or something we've carried around for us for a long time, and we've continually received the same message. So I wanted to talk today about just the importance of meeting ourselves where we're at emotionally. And I know that for those of us who try and want to have a higher perspective and want to be free of emotional baggage and emotional trauma, or want to heal and integrate our emotional trauma, I should say, it's often easy to jump to giving ourselves advice, or we do this with other people. We jump into giving them advice rather than validating first and foremost how they feel, or with ourselves, giving ourselves advice rather than validating first and foremost how we feel. And the problem with that is that if we don't validate we feel, then we're basically saying it's unacceptable, it's not okay. Then we're ultimately basically telling ourselves the truth of who I am right now is not right, it's incorrect. And we can never have healing with that. We can never have healing. Now, to connect this to the last couple of videos I've been talking about, which is projection and empathy, and how they sort of interplay with each other, and how we all do it, and how they're both valuable tools of understanding ourselves. However, they also can be so triggering one to the other. And I think I have found in my life the most difficult place for me to be when I'm trying to validate my own emotions is when I'm directly conflicting with somebody who wants me to agree with them, when I don't agree when in some way to agree with their reality or interpretation of something is to invalidate me. And of course I know, again, at a cognitive level, that both realities are correct. Nobody's right or wrong. Everyone's perception is just that. It's their perception of how things happen, and therefore their emotions in relation to how something happened are correct. They're emotionally responding to their interpretation of events correctly. But I think it's difficult when your perspective and someone else's perspective come in conflict with each other, and especially when you specifically trigger somebody. Because usually like for example with me, if I trigger someone, usually they're then telling me, or vice versa, I've done this too, we usually then tell the person, it's your fault I'm feeling this way. You're responsible for how I'm feeling. Not that we necessarily directly say that, but we will say, you hurt my feelings. You make me feel whatever. When in reality, nobody can make us feel anything, and we only feel what we feel based on our own beliefs about ourselves. And so when we're triggered, it's such a valuable tool to go in and figure out where we are not in alignment with our true selves, where we are invalidating ourselves, where we have abandoned ourselves, and maybe perhaps where original trauma is. And I know for me, when my mother died, I was never validated about that. My mom died, and I moved in with my dad, who I didn't know, and he never once, my father just didn't know how to deal with grief. And I don't think anyone in my life knew how to deal with grief, and all of my siblings, we were all in so much pain. We didn't know how to be there for each other, and I was the youngest. And the environment was just like nothing happened. And when I would be upset, my dad would ask me what was wrong, and then act like one time specifically I said, well, I miss my mom, and I was crying, and he said, well, you're just saying that because you're mad at me. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I've had to do some shadow work and realize, why do I have such a hard time validating myself? And why do I feel also at the same time, if I'm trying to validate myself, if I'm trying to say I feel this way and it's okay for me to feel this way, I feel like it's threatened. I feel like I'm hurting someone else. Like I'm going to hurt someone else if I validate how I feel. And through doing inner child work, I've directly connected that feeling to my mother's death, and to feeling like if I was upset, I was somehow bothering or hurting somebody else. And my dad would sometimes specifically say things like that I was selfish, or that I was only thinking of myself, or that I didn't realize what, I didn't realize what other people were going through, or whatever. And so I very much internalized the grief from my mom's death, and I am still in some ways grieving. I didn't grieve at all for a while because I didn't know how. I mean, I was upset, but I was told that I was not correct to feel the way that I felt, and so the conclusion I came to was that something was wrong with me. And it's amazing how even through 8 years of therapy and a lot of inner work, how I still struggle to validate how I feel. And by doing that, I realize that other people, when I don't validate myself, other people do not feel validated with me either, do not feel validated. And although it is not my responsibility to validate anybody, it's their responsibility, but I do believe in validating emotion. I believe that all emotions are valid, and it is my hope that I would always validate somebody's emotion. But I've realized that I'm limited in that there are, when it comes to my own personal triggers and things that don't feel acceptable to me, it's harder for me to validate other people. And so I wanted to, in this audio, to just bring up the importance, and I guess the whole topic in general, of meeting yourself where you're at. And that regardless of any sort of higher state you're trying to achieve or exaltation of healing, it is absolutely crucial to always meet yourself where you're at, and that to know that just because you may be feeling something negative or be feeling hurt, and maybe you know ultimately that this person is not trying to hurt you, or the situation from a higher perspective, you can see how it all works out, and any of those spiritual bypassing things we tell ourselves, it's still, when it comes down to it, in any given moment, we feel what we feel, regardless of what we know. And in my situation lately, I have been re-triggered about my mother's death because my aunt recently died, who was my mom's sister, and my last connection to my mom, and also been my mother, my fill-in mother since my mother has died. And even though I didn't have the same relationship with her as I had with my mother, and obviously we weren't as close, I still was just re-triggered about all of that. And on top of it, felt as if it was not okay for me to, nobody did that to me. I myself, I didn't even realize it, but this huge wave of like, it's not okay for me to feel what I feel came up. But then I knew it was okay, and so I felt like I had to fight for the right for it to be okay for me to be upset, or for me to have emotions about it, or for me to make it about me in any way, because I was never allowed to make my mom's death about me. And I have felt most of my life, my interpretation of a lot of the traumatic events in my life were that I was not allowed to have emotions, and that if I had them, then it was at the detriment of somebody else. Then I was somehow hurting somebody else, or taking away from somebody else, or making someone's life more difficult by needing space, or by feeling, or by being upset, or whatever the case is. And again, it's a really complicated, sticky issue, because this is all connected to childhood stuff. But I've just been really realizing the importance of going back into, first of all, whatever we feel, as I always say, checking in with what you feel and making it okay. It's okay. It's okay how I feel. But I realized since my aunt's death that what I've been doing is like, yeah, it's okay, but I want to achieve this higher feeling state. I want to I want to transcend. I've been trying, there's been a little bit of drama since my aunt died, and nothing, no like enormous deals, but just a little bit of family drama, and I've been wanting to ascend it, like I'm better than it or something. But the truth is, emotionally speaking, I'm extremely upset. And because I'm triggered by the original thing of I'm not allowed to have emotions without it hurting somebody else. And so it's been a really interesting lesson for me, especially as I've been talking and doing videos and teaching on emotions and emotional healing and being an empath and what that means, to have such a huge trauma come up for me, such a huge trigger, and feel like I'm fighting it so much, like really fighting that, the balance between validating who I am, validating where I'm at, and what I need. Because when I ask myself what I need space. I just need time. I need things on pause. I need space. I don't want to be around people, because when I'm around people, I naturally empath what they're feeling, and I feel like I can't get in touch with me. And so in my life, whenever I have truly validated how I felt, usually when I ask what I need, it's always space. Almost always, it's I need space. I need space from other people. But in order for me to give myself what I need, then that means I have to tell people I need space. And then that means typically that people around me, a lot of times, take it personal. That I'm saying somehow that they are causing some sort of pain in me, which is not the case. It's just that I need space from other people in order to process what I feel, because if I'm with too many people, I'm just empathing what they feel, and I feel like I'm not allowed to have emotions. And again, no one's saying I'm not allowed to, it's just how I feel, because my natural inclination as an empath is to tune in what other people need, tune into that, and I'm not allowed to have emotions. And especially when it's involving people, that, like for instance, in my family, with my aunt's death, there are other people that are upset and triggered and have their own issues because of their own relationship with her and are going through their own thing. And I've realized that right now at a time when I know that a lot of my siblings who lost their mom that are going through a hard thing, it's really difficult for me to be there for them, because I feel like by being there, I'm so tuned into what they need and what they feel that I'm completely abandoning myself in the middle of something that's incredibly triggering for me. But then I feel like I'm being selfish for taking care of myself, so all of these things, guilt, trauma, all this stuff's coming up, and I've just been blown away about how difficult, not difficult, because I feel good. I feel like I'm learning so much that it's invaluable. But when I just connect to my emotions, how complicated it is. Complicated is the better word. It feels so complicated, and I feel stuck. Often I feel stuck between a rock and a hard place, because to really validate myself and give myself what I need, it feels as if I'm gonna hurt somebody else, or someone else takes it personally. And if I try to compensate that or make someone else feel better for that, then I feel like I am trying to take responsibility for someone else's emotions, which I'm not supposed to do. And I've done that in the past, which all that ultimately does is disempower the other person, because all that ultimately is me saying, you can't take care of your emotions, so here, let me take care of them for you. Even though my ego would be saying, I want to be there for them because they need me. And both are true, but it's still disempowering. It's disempowering to me, and it's disempowering to the person that anyone that I would be doing that for. So I just kind of wanted to talk about like the importance of meeting ourselves where we're at and giving ourselves what we need, and having to deal with perhaps what that may cause for other people around us. Other people around us, what we need might be something that makes other people uncomfortable, and we just have to be okay with that. Okay with that. Maybe people think I'm insensitive right now. Maybe people think I'm selfish right now. Maybe people think I'm acting I'm overreacting about my aunt's death, because people certainly thought that with my mom's death, which is really interesting. So it's just dealing with multiple levels of trying to understand myself, and then at the same time give myself grace, because I feel when I analyze all of it, I feel very judgmental towards myself. And this has just been shocking to me, this amount of information I've learned about myself from this one experience. So yeah, I just wanted to share that, and I would love to hear your thoughts on validating your emotions and what kind of things those bring up for you. Okay, ciao.